This is Jessica, Peyton, Sarah, and Valeria's tracker project. Our question we're trying to solve for is how do the horizontal and vertical velocities of a good and bad dive compare, and how do these affect the launch and entry angles of the dive? By clicking the coordinate axis button, we place an axis to line up with the end of the diving board and the diver's initial position. By clicking this button and then scrolling down to the calibration stick, we lined up the calibration stick from her head to her toes. Then we lined up the stick with the y-axis. After converting her height from feet to meters, we typed in her height to calibrate the stick. We then clicked the button Create and scrolled down to point mass. We plotted the points by holding the Shift button and clicked each position of the left toe, as you can see here. We used the point mass to calculate the diver's exact position, distance, velocity, etc. in relation to time. Next, we set up the graphs. We were first given a position x graph and a table with time, x position, and y position. We wanted to bring up a table with Vx and Vy. We changed the default graphs by clicking Table, checking Vx and Vy, and unchecking x and y. We then picked a point on both the launch angle and the entry angle to do our calculations. We next changed the top graph to a Vx graph by clicking on the X on the left and scrolling down to Vx. We changed the second graph to a Vy graph by first clicking Plot View and then clicking on the X on the left and selecting Vy. We did the same process for the good dive as well. We then used the graphs of Vx and Vy to set up a projectile problem in which we solved for the launch angle and entry angle. To do this, we set up triangles with Vx, Vy, and Vi and solved for the launch and entry angles using tangent values. Once the angles for both the good dive and the bad dives were determined, we compared the launch and entry values of the bad dive to the good dive. A perfect dive would consist of a launch angle of 0 degrees, purely vertical, and an entry angle of about 90 degrees. From our calculations, the first diver, Claire, launched at an angle of 25.461 degrees and entered at an angle of 55.839 degrees. The second diver, Margie, with a better dive, launched at an angle of 1.854 degrees and entered the water at an angle of 85.232 degrees. So it is clear that if the bad diver had had more vertical velocity and less horizontal velocity, her launch angle would be closer to 0 degrees and the entry angle would be closer to 90 degrees, making it an almost perfect dive.